I have always been fascinated about aliens. Ever since as a kid, I had always been fascinated by it, and ever since I have been seeing some sci-fi movies like Star Wars, E.T. the Extraterrestrial. I mean, those things always sparked an interest in me believing in actual aliens. And even I've been hearing stories about people claim being seeing actual aliens or UFOs, or even the most of all, the most notable, famous UFO was the Roswell crash in 1947. And even a lot of my family and friends probably didn't even believe in aliens or anything. But I never pay much attention to that. My name is Colin. I'm currently 51 years old. But what I'm going to tell you happened to me and two of my friends back in 1988 when I was 15 years old. This happened during our summer break. Me and my friends Joshua, 16, and Johnny, 15, we were having our summer break and we were just bored after some time. And we were living in a medium-sized town in the state of Iowa. I prefer not to be mentioning exact town since for more privacy. But anyways, we were just having a lot of fun in the first few weeks. And but after a while, after almost done the same things, we kind of get bored of that. Like playing sports like basketball at my place, or go to the lake, or go to the bowling alley. It just since we live in a medium-sized town, and if we had done almost the things that we normally do, we eventually will get bored. So Joshua, who is our friendly hunter, which well, he is a hunter since he was a kid. We was told from about his had idea. Why don't we go for 1 week trip camping? Since me and Johnny, we usually had sometimes been camping with our families from time to time, but Joshua's family has been pretty much outdoor going family for many years. In fact, for almost at least a few generations. His grandfather was a decent, well decent hunter, and his father and John himself, Joshua himself. So he was like, yeah, why not? But there was only one issue. We needed to have our family's permission first. We couldn't just leave. If we did, our parents would actually call the police, and we would have been grounded for weeks, or perhaps then even the rest of the year. And that's one thing we didn't want to risk. So, luckily though, we did ask our parents, and we had permission. And lucky for us, Joshua, he just recently had his driving license permit, and he was also given his family's old car, was that was big enough for all of us and the supplies that we were supposed to bring us along, like tents, food, and all that kinds. And he even was allowed to bring his own hunting rifle as protection if there was something like a bear, wild boars, or any other dangerous animals. I was like, now that no mention those animals, I was like, is this really safe to even go there? But Joshua ensured us that this is nothing going to be worrying about. I mean, he said like, the best is to bring this rifle with us and nothing. I mean, if we didn't bring it, and we didn't encounter a dangerous animal, and nothing to defend us, well, we pretty much been dead. And I couldn't speak against that logic. So, we brought along with his hunting rifle and a few hunting knives, and that was pretty much it. And we asked Joshua where we were supposed to be going, and he said that he knew a small, dense woods outside town that was a decent size, and he has been there before. Okay, so we hopped in a car and we drove. And when he parked the car in the woods, we saw there's a decent place that we can set up camp. But he said, nope, not here. Not here? And we couldn't like drive the car even further because the trees were more denser and further in. He said, no, it's just a little bit further in, maybe just like 20 yards in. Okay, we grabbed our gears and went in. And sure enough, there were this small opening in like 20 yards in where we actually set up our tents, and we even made our campfire. We asked Joshua how he knew this place. He did mention that he actually been to this place multiple times with his dad when they were hunting season. And in this region or this area usually have a lot of good deers, moose, and even other type of prey that for hunting season. And it makes sense. It was decent size. So since we were supposed to be in here for about a week, so we decided to just do some exploring in the area. I mean, since Joshua probably knew much about this place, we did ask him if it was any caves or a lake in the area. He said that there was a small lake not that far from the camp that we could just go to swim around if we wanted to, but there were no caves. That was a bummer. I always want to be explored some new caves or old mines. Even though I've been told, never go to an old abandoned mines because they could be very dangerous. But anyways, for the first few days we actually had a great time. We were doing some exploring, we even did some fishing in the lake, we swam in the lake, we're just having a great time. But then, on the night of Thursday to the night between Thursday and Friday, I heard this strange sound from my tent. Well, technically, me and Johnny we were sharing a tent since Joshua had his own, but could only fit one person in it. I mean, I was deep asleep when I suddenly woke up with this strange type of humming sound. I was like, "What is that?" Maybe Joshua brought his radio up or something, or forgot to turn it off. Joshua did bring his radio, which was battery powered, but when I looked at his tent, it was completely dark, there was no sound from it. And I looked at Johnny. He was tired, he was fast asleep. And the sound wasn't stopped though. But it didn't seem to get any louder, and I did step on the tent, just look around, listen, if you can see if there was any other people in the area. But there were no signs of any people or talking, but this particular sound repeatedly, and I looked up. Nothing. But as I was about to get back in the tent, the sound suddenly stopped, but in distant I saw this quite bright yellow-white-ish color, almost like a floodlight. It only for a brief moment and then suddenly turned off, and the sound was gone. I was like, what if it was a hunter? But a hunter wouldn't even bring that type of flashlight with them, would they? I was going to ask that to Joshua in the morning, since I wasn't a hunter and I don't know if that's a possible idea for a hunter to bring. So in the morning, when we were having breakfast, I mentioned these things happened to Johnny and Joshua, and none of them didn't heard anything. But I mentioned this light. I asked Joshua if there's a normally for a hunter to bring any sort of flashlight that was almost like having this bright light, like a floodlight. And he shook his head, no, that is a bad idea to even bring. Normally a hunter, well, even though there was not a hunting season at the moment, maybe it was another camper. Perhaps they saw our camp since our campfire at the time was just still had this glowing amber, so they thought maybe there was people there, so they just walked a different way. That would make sense. And also when he said that no hunter or camper would even have that type of strong broad light, I was like, I wonder what it could have been though. I thought it could not have been a helicopter, because a helicopter do have strong lights when they're using for finding people that gone missing. But because if a helicopter would suddenly easily would have a loud sound of a helicopter, but it wasn't any. And if there was that type of sound, Joshua and Johnny would easily have woken up, but they didn't. So I brushed it off and we did continue our trip as normal. But that evening, I went to my tent quite early, around 8 p.m., even though it was still a little bit sunlight out, but I was tired. And maybe an hour later, I think Johnny went to bed at 10. But around almost, I think it was around 11:30 p.m. when suddenly Johnny shook me awake and it's like, listen, can you hear that? At first, I didn't know what he was talking about, but then yeah, I heard this type of metallic humming sound. Yeah, I can hear that, I said. What can it have been? I didn't mention that was the exact same sound I heard the day before. Then he actually believed me, and we decided to wake up John and Joshua. But we didn't need to have to, because this time he was actually outside our tent and asked, guys, can you please keep it down? But we told him that was not us. Then he shook and asked, if that's not you, then what is it? We didn't know what we said. So we went out the tent. We decided to go look around just near our campsite to see if there was any signs of other people. So we brought our flashlights, and we even brought our hunting knives, and Joshua took his rifle just in case. But as we were looking around in the woods, the sound actually didn't even get any louder or even distant. It repeated had actually remained at the same level. And it was like we never actually approached it. But suddenly, we saw this strange light in the distance. This strong floodlight. I pointed out, that is the same light I saw yesterday, last night. We decided to walk up a little bit further, but this time we turned off our light flashlights because we didn't need it. But we decided to keep ourselves hidden, maybe behind some rocks or maybe bushes. And we actually found this very much thick bushes, maybe halfway through that place of this light. And as we were standing there, we were looking through the bushes and we saw this strange craft. And Joshua was like, what is that? Johnny said, maybe an Air Force craft? I shook my head and said, no, that is definitely not an Air Force craft. How do you know? And I should mention that at the time I actually have a cousin who was was actually enlisted to United States Air Force at the time. And he had told me all kinds of things about different planes that he had been piloted. And I did ask sometimes if the Air Force ever tried of new prototypes planes, like stealth bombers, which has been reported some scene. Even though he was permitted not to be saying anything, but he made a hint that the words and that. But I asked him if he could do it on schematics and like that, and kinda he did. But no, that is definitely not an Air Force craft. Then what is it? A spacecraft? Yeah, maybe NASA is trying to do a new spacecraft. But guys, why would NASA put their spacecraft here? Middle of the forest, middle of the woods, in the state of Iowa, when they have their headquarters in Houston, in Texas, and they are in Florida. That is across the country, isn't it? Both Joshua and Johnny looked at me and was like, wow, he's right. But then we saw this light didn't getting a dimmer and the sound repeatedly, how this like metallic type of sound. We didn't know exactly what it could have been. And as we look closely at this craft, it was not a lot type typical UFO like, but this one was like a saucer shape. This was almost like a sphere, like a ball, metallic ball, a silver color, but have a stripe in the middle. It was like a black line, and suddenly it looked at being a door opening in the middle of it, and we could not believe it. Walked out at least 5 or 6 alien creatures, humanoids, but not like this typical Roswell aliens. These aliens had to be at least 7 feet tall, and they were actually like their skin was light blue, and they had this like almost human-sized eyes, but they were complete yellow, and they were talking and doing some sounds with their fingers, and they had only 4 fingers, and this looks at least, and they was wearing this type of silverish uniform, if maybe like an overall or something type of maybe a military uniform or something, and we kept it silent. They and suddenly smaller things came out of this alien craft, this UFO. They looked to be almost like a hand, almost like a bowling ball sized object. They were flying around. Some of them was glowing green, red, and even yellow. They were flying around in the woods like and brought back with some samples of looks like plants and soil. We were so scared that if they saw us, we didn't know if they were what they would do with us. I mean, I had told my friends a lot of stories of aliens that people have been abducted by aliens, claimed had some medical experiment on them, and that was one thing I not want to be planned to be happening on me. And several times those lights was flying almost near our hiding spot, and even one of those aliens was probably I say like maybe 4 or 5 feet away from us, and we could see this alien clearly. But I thought maybe it could have been maybe 15 or 20 minutes. Those smaller lights went back in the craft, and those aliens looked around and went back, and suddenly this light turned off, and it flew straight up in the air, like almost like a bullet. We stayed in those hiding spots for another 10 or 15 minutes, and we was complete silent. We didn't even know if those aliens even saw us. But after those almost 20 minutes, I looked at my friend and it's like, I saw they were so pale or scared. Especially when that alien was so close to us. We have no idea. So, I told my friends we should go back to our campsite quietly without flashlight, just in case. So we did. At the campsite, we actually sat down and we made another fire, and we're like, what the world did we just see in there? And like, guys, we literally seen an actual UFO with aliens. They actually saw that. And like, we should have something we should tell people about this. But I like, who would believe us? People have been told the stories about being seeing aliens and UFOs for years, but none of those people never even has been considered crazy or just imagine it. Who would even believe us? He's right, said Johnny. Who would even believe us? Our friends, maybe? Yeah, but I mean, if we had an actual proof. So we decided to go back to the spot in the morning, early noon, to see if there was any spots or any signs of it. We managed to even had I did brought my camera with me this time, like an old camera from the 80s. I mean, I wasn't much into. I had this type of hobby to take photos of my camping trips or anywhere I go. And the next day, we went to the same spot, and it wasn't much anything at all. There were no footprints of the aliens, so there, and sure, there was only a small hole, like a small impression of that something had just been there, but it wasn't like a scorch mark or anything. It was like just a small dent in the soil. Maybe I'd say maybe as 8 inches deep, and maybe as 20 inches wide. It wasn't even that big enough. I did took some photos, and we even walked around and took some photos, but with no signs of if anything has happened there. So we decided to cut our trip short. So we went back to campsite and we packed up everything and went back to car and drove home. Our families were a little bit surprised that we were home early, but we said we were just feeling homesick. And the rest of the summer, we talked about this. And since we did tell some of our friends and family about this, but they didn't even believe us, which would be something we already knew. But over the years, as I was getting finished high school, get college, and even get married, I did telling this stories to my wife at the time when we were still dating, and she believed me. And she did believe me. And when my own kids growing up, I did tell them stories about my experience of seeing this alien, and I even showed them photos I still had of the ground. But they said that that was not a much. There could have been anything. But my friends, they still believe it, and they actually still live in the same town actually. And over the years, we still keep talking about our experience about this strange alien. And if the funny fact is, shortly after we get home, I actually drove a skim. This is like a sketch how this alien looked like, and I still have it. I did show it around to my family and friends, and still, no one didn't believe us. But I don't mind. I don't mind if anyone didn't believe us. But I do know I I saw an alien that night, or aliens with an alien craft. And that's all I can say. If people doesn't believe you, it's up to them. But I do know what I saw that night in that dense forest all those years ago. Aliens do in fact exist.